You are now listening to Femme Regard Podcast with Tessa Markle
and Carolina Alvarez.
Femme.
Hey, Femme. So, as you know, our mission at Femme Regard, or if you don't know, if you're a new listener, we're going to fill you in right now. But it is really important for us to tell women's stories and for women to have more opportunity in front of and behind the camera. That's what we're all about. That's why we are a woman-owned company. And we love seeing that in the field. And we love seeing people working towards that. And we love to see a powerful woman in charge. So today we have Madeline DiNonno. She is the CEO and president of the Geena Davis Institute on Gender in Media. So what does that mean? Basically, they are a foundation that uses cold, hard data to prove when there is a gender imbalance, and to do that from the front end before projects go out, and to also do that from the back end to see, hey, did this meet the qualifications? But it's more than just checking boxes. And Madeline is going to get into that a lot in this episode, so I'll save that for how she explains it. But it is an amazing institute that really, its goal is to make sure that there is equality, gender equality specifically, but also a broad,
race.
It's not just gender. Yeah.
Yeah, age, all of that, inclusion for diverse voices. Exactly. All about. So we have this well-balanced production and storytelling that opens the doors for many other voices to be heard and seen, which we think is so important. And that's always been our mission as well. So we love that.
They've worked with a lot of giant companies and corporations, which is inspiring to see that, they're being supported so much and to see the change actually happening. And what Madeline says at the end of this episode, perfection.
Perfection. And I think just paves the way for a more positive future. I think it's easy to we made a sci-fi film, so we harbor on kind of tech advancements and how scary that world looks and what change and how that impact. But aside from all those scarier things, it's nice to see that there is a positive movement happening for this balance, economy in the entertainment industry, and how this tools like this and the research and the work they're doing is paving a way for a change in what we see and consume and how the workforce is. So really loved chatting with her. And I mean, she's just a powerhouse. She comes from such a background of being on so many boards, and she's a workforce. She is a force to be reckoned with. So
yes. Before we get into the episode, I do want to say a quick thank you to Jackie, who has kind of coordinated this all for us, and to Linda, who's first suggested that we reach out to Madeline in the first place. And to remind you guys, at the end, she's going to list all the ways that you can not only get involved, but just follow along with the progress. They're doing so many new things too, the revamping, there's so much going on, and we'll put that all in the show notes as well. So with that, enjoy.
Madeline, this resume, how do I even introduce you? The things you've gone, I would say, are not the indie approach to the industry, but such an important world that you've lived in and been involved. I mean, you've been in executive positions in so many various big production roles, whether you're handling marketing or distribution. And so you've been the CEO, you've sat as the executive on all these boards. But before we get to how you've landed in those positions, and more importantly, why you followed this path, let's take it back. Where did you go to school? Where'd you grow up? And how'd you get to be in this?
To where you are. Yeah.
Well, going back to being immigrants from Italy, I have the privilege of being the first person in my family to actually go to a university.
Wow.
At all, and which was Boston University. So I was the first. Both my parents had careers and vocations, but none of them had the opportunity to go to a 4-year post-high school institution like I did. So that was a pretty big deal.
Your parents, were they, did they come with you to America? And, were they excited to see you in this position, taking a hold of your own future in your own hands, essentially?
Both my parents were actually born in America,
Okay.
but my grandfather was born in Italy, and obviously all of my great grandparents came, from Italy. So, but both my parents were born on the East Coast.
Okay,
Okay.
so East Coasters in the house. We love it.
Yes.
Represent. Woo! Love her already. All right, Madeline. So what did you study at Boston?
Well, let me tell the story this way.
Okay.
Once upon a time,
Mhm.
uh, Madeline gets to go to four-year university, first in her family, but must graduate on time. And back in my day, there was no 5, 6 year plan. It was 4 years and you got to go to work. So I did not have a sense of what I wanted to do. And I didn't have any pathway to follow because no one in my family had a chance to go to university. So I learned a lot by reading obituaries. I was fascinated by reading obituaries. I was an executive junkie. So some people read People magazine and now, of course, whatever it is online, but I loved a magazine called Working Women, and I was constantly looking at women executives
Mhm.
and looking at their careers and how did they set forth a path.
Mm.
So because I had no connections whatsoever, it was my internships that formulated the direction that I was going to go in. And I have to give a shout out to my Uncle Frankie, who was responsible not only for my internships, but also some of my first jobs. And we'll talk about him in a minute. But anyway, all that to say is I changed my major so many times that then I had to make a decision. And I chose being an English major, which may seem random, but at that time, I was very fortunate because of my Uncle Frankie to have an internship at ABC. And all of those executives at that time, I'm talking Bob Iger, Jeff Ruey, the titans of television,
Mhm.
a lot of them were English majors. And I'm like, well, if it worked for them, it's going to work for me. So I just chose that because I had to graduate in 4 years. And there's only so many times you can change your
Yep,
major.
Yeah.
for
So that's how
sure.
that happened.
And it's like so hard looking back as at my younger self. How does one choose something for that you feel such a strong pressure that will like impact your entire future? Because the story we were taught was you go to college and you get the job that you studied for, and it's got to be this way or you get the highway. And here we are
Yeah.
as filmmakers who didn't go to school for it. But it's just like one of those things where I feel like still to this day, a lot of people, they go to school for something and it's a tool in your toolbox, but it's not always the thing that you're going to be an English teacher, let's say, right?
Right.
It's not always this A plus B equals C, that like formulaic. So I think it's really impressive that you were able to kind of be like, okay, English, I'm going to put this in my toolbox because I see the roadmap that someone else has paid for me. And did you, and again, at that time, can't help, but these are probably also male executives, top of the game, right? So is there anyone else that kind of inspired you to further be like, okay, I want to work for this company next?
Not company per se, but at that time, there was a woman, Christine Kawa, I'm not saying her name right, and she was, I think originally an attorney, but she was one of the top senior executives at ABC. This is like back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was very impressive. And there were women that, were coming up in the ranks.
Right.
At that time, you had Barbara Walters with her show and,
Right.
so it was very, very inspiring to see that.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too. It's like, we talk about this in media representation of what, you know, you as the audience see in film and TV is like, when you get to see yourself, like it means so much, you know, it makes such a big difference. But that's on the other side of the camera too, you know, whether that's a career choice for you or just knowing that, hey, these women are taking these power roles. It's very inspiring.
So what did Uncle Frankie do for you next? We got
Well, and I have to give a shout out also to Elizabeth Aloisio, who was the person at ABC and HR who really helped me and mentored me and helped me get through all these different internships there. And one of the first ones I did was working for Sue Lehman, who's one of 3 executive assistants for Roone Arledge, who was the head of ABC Sports and News at the time, who pioneered what I think modern television sports and news has become. And so I was able to replace those assistants, some of those assistants when they were out on vacation. And here I am, I'm 17 years old, I'm swirling around in Roone Arledge's chair, looking at this wall of TVs, getting to go to using his tickets for hockey games. I mean, talk about failing up.
wow.
But anyway, so I have to give a shout out to them. And that's how I wound up landing my first job, because I spent my entire years interning at ABC. So by the time I graduated from BU, I had 4 years experience. Every Christmas, every Easter, every break, I went back and worked somewhere at ABC, and I worked in documentaries and PR. I worked all over the place in sports, and that's how I was able to land my first job at ABC in national publicity, working for a fantastic woman by the name of Anne-Marie Riccitelli, who I'm still very, very close to, and really was able to hone my skills. So most kids, I don't know, maybe don't come out of a 4-year college with, 4 years work experience, but I worked.
Yeah.
Yes, that is definitely a true testament to your strengths and your work ethic and drive. We talk about it, I think, in whichever part of the industry you are, drive is everything. It's crucial to getting into an industry that's very difficult. It's not for the weak-hearted, let's just say that.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm curious is you didn't go filmmaker though. You went into the corporate office, the space where deals are happening, PR, like marketing, everything that you're talking about. Why did you go that way? And what about it really drew you in?
Oh, it was very practical. It's about working class ethic. It's about, you get a job, you work. There was no sense of starving for the sake of the arts. It's like, you have to pay rent, you have to work. So as much as I come from a creative family, and I do come from a family of artists, there was none of that was going to be for me. It was about hit the ground, get a job, pay rent.
That totally makes sense.
I feel for that because
Yeah.
a lot of my past 6 years, I've always held down a 9 to 5 and did the filmmaker thing because exactly right. Like if you turn into our very, very early on episodes of the pod, I found out quickly that for me, I couldn't be the actor auditioning anymore. I just didn't feel empowered. I also just needed to be independent. Like the end of the day was not asking for handouts from my family. So I was like, I need to do this. And I think there's so many different ways to navigate that. Everyone's journey is different, but I really respect that. And I think that sometimes you just have to, you feel like you have to take this one path, but look where the skills you learn and where you can grow from there. And that's where I'm curious, like, where did that take you next to your first job?
So my first job was working in publicity for ABC, working for Anne-Marie, who's fabulous. And it was very interesting because I learned a lot about pitching. I learned a lot about writing. I learned a lot about talent, how to handle talent. They are not usual human beings, and cannot be treated as such.
Yeah.
And learned about marketing and publicity and events. And so it was a really great foundation, which those skills, served me moving on, how to speak to high-powered people,
Mhm.
how to deal with egos, how to deal with, persuasion, conflict, like all those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a really like a great skill set to learn, because a lot of times I think people concentrate on the skills specific to a career, right? Like for filmmaking, for instance, like knowing how to operate the camera, if that's the path you're choosing or whatever it is. But like these are life skills that you're learning as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
So
then,
what
sorry, go ahead.
with publicity too, I think that I've always been curious at how to work in the PR world for those reasons, like how to really understand people and marketing and audience building and growth. Did that make you want to work for another agency after? Or I guess if anyone who, let me circle back to my question, with anyone who's interested in that world, is there any advice on how to break into PR? Because it's also very competitive, I think. And there's, like you said, a lot that goes into the job.
Well, times have changed, and technology and social media platforms has allowed everyone to be a publicist.
That's true. We're finding that we've just finished our first feature film, and we're kind of looking at self PR being really the staple of what we're going to be doing for to further push our
And
film.
so
Yeah.
now you have influencers and tastemakers, and there's a lot of ways to approach it and have a point of view. So it's much different than when I was coming up.
Mhm.
I mean, it's true. Technology has changed the entire industry, as we know, for sure, in the way cameras operate, to how we digest and view all the various films and TV episodes. It's changed the entire landscape. But I think that's a very good point for anyone who wants to like dig into it further, or is struggling about how to approach PR for themselves, like we were just sharing. That I think you have a lot at your very own fingertips to utilize. But I just think it is a fascinating world. So, I mean, you've moved on from PR for sure. Where did you go to next?
Well, back to my Uncle Frankie.
Oh,
So,
we can't forget Uncle Frankie.
No, so
No,
he
no.
plays a role here. So at the time, the corporate structure at ABC was such that there wasn't a lot of movement for me in terms of junior management positions to step into, because I didn't want to become a publicist.
Okay.
And I looked around the company, and for me, there wasn't an immediate pathway.
Mhm.
And so Uncle Frankie was dating another very high-powered woman by the name of Joanne Siegel, who was at Lancome Cosmetics.
Wow.
And at that time, they had, I would say, promotional departments that would work with major retail outlets
Mhm.
and were the liaison between the sales force and those retail department stores, and would work to put together programs and promotions, etc. So I was able to get promoted into one of these regional coordinator positions, working for this fabulous woman, Joanne Siegel. And that's where I really learned about more classic packaged goods and marketing, because at that time, product marketing at Lancome were people wearing lab coats and smearing stuff all over your face and
Yeah.
testing and whatnot, which was fabulous being so young. And I'm like, yeah, I'll try that cream, I'll try that, whatever.
Yeah.
But learning the
Wow.
business of sales, marketing, distribution. So it was, again, another very enlightening, very informative position. So yeah, so that taught me a lot about that side of business.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's interesting too that I mean, you're kind of doing it's similar things, you know, it's all promotional, but it's totally different industries. So you're really kind of, you know, running the whole gamut here. And, you know, all of that eventually leading you to what you're doing today with the Geena Davis Foundation. And we'll get into what that is and what you're doing specifically, but how exactly did that shift happen when you moved into the position you're in today?
Well, I think for many of us, and particularly when you think about what happened in the pandemic and with the strike, have to rewire,
Mm-hmm.
repivot,
Mm-hmm.
to capitalize on passions and or necessities.
Yeah.
And for me, I reached a platform where I was able to kind of hang out the shingle as a CEO
Mm-hmm.
and realized that it wasn't the right opportunity, which happens to many of us,
Mm-hmm.
and knew that I needed to uh, find something else. But in tandem, a very dear friend of mine passed away very unexpectedly. And the combination of those two things led me to this pivot, pause, rewire.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, uh, how can I use my power for good? But I have to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on an exploration of other C-level executives that decided to move into the not-for-profit arena. And that's what ultimately led me to Geena, and Geena being led, you know, to me uh, because I wanted to rewire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And reset and like kind of see where, like you said, use your strengths for a different purpose, one that you really feel like you can serve the community. And I think that's really admirable. And I mean, and it's tragic too, when like sometimes it just takes something to happen to you to like revisit your whole life, essentially, like, what
Yeah.
am I doing? And I think the pandemic did that for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. So yeah, how did well, shall we intro the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media, and
Yeah. Yeah,
let's
tell us what
do
you
it.
guys are about, what it is that you do.
So our mission is really focused on transforming the media landscape to be much more inclusive, to mitigate unconscious bias, to infuse storytelling that can be, you know, inclusive and reflective of our, you know, diverse population, which is
Mm-hmm.
also 50%, you know, female. And we're more of a B2B than a B2C because we use data as our currency and as our means to help the industry not only be aware of the disparities and some of the gender gaps in what we see on screen, but to also help them navigate a path to fix it.
Love that.
And it can be more easily remedied than a lot of our other social issues that we have facing us in the world. And the Institute was started by two-time Academy Award winner Geena Davis. And it came out of her uh, recognition, immediate recognition as a mom watching preschool programming with her daughter, who's a toddler at the time, that there just wasn't a lot of female presence. So female characters in all of the preschool programming that she was showing her daughter. And because Geena had acquired quite a heightened awareness of how audiences and women and girls would respond to her in her
Mm-hmm.
roles as a baseball player in League of Their Own, or playing the first female president on TV, or in Thelma and Louise, that she had this heightened awareness. And she brought that with her in how she observed this content as a mom, you know, with her daughter. And it made her question and think about, is this true? Is this just something that I'm noticing? And what she found out in her investigation, speaking to friends and speaking to executives and and in the industry that nobody saw it through her lens. And that's what sparked her to take action and say, hey, I need to get the data. I need to know if I'm right. And that's how
Wow.
the whole thing got started. So kind of an accident, not exactly on her bucket list, but that's how it happened.
Yeah. And it's so smart to, there's so many causes out there, and raising awareness is one thing, of course, that's the first step. But then to be able to actually use cold, hard data for the advocacy, it really opens people's eyes.
Exactly. Data has been the key to our success. It's been the key to provide fact-based information so
Mhm.
that our partners can make informed decisions about how they look at content. So it's been very important to us.
Yeah. And how long has the Institute been around, out of curiosity?
So Geena formed the Institute around 2004.
Okay.
It took a few years for her to raise money and commission the first study, and then have been building on it ever since.
Amazing. And before we dive even deeper into the Institute, let our listeners know specifically what it is that you do there.
So I have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the organization.
Amazing. We love to see a powerful woman as a CEO.
Yes, yes, Madeline. And I want to also highlight like the two research tools because I think they're so interesting. And like, again, this is probably tech that you've had to like build and implement into how other businesses can correct themselves and look at data, right? So you have the Geena Davis Inclusion Quotient, which it leverages the machine learning to analyze audio and video media content. And this allows them to kind of identify the representation in simpler terms, like from across the gender, race, ethnicity, LGBTQIA, plus like all these, like how old people are, all of this, and gets, I think allows then you as the business to see, okay, like where are we on the scale of this? And then you have another tool called the spell check for bias that provides analysis of pre-production scripts with the purpose of identifying opportunities for greater representation of marginalized communities within 6 major identities, again, gender, race, LGBTQIA, disability, age, and body type, which is also these are technology that tools that I've not heard of or been used before. So if you could speak to their creation, existence, and how you've been seeing them perform, I'm very curious.
Exactly. So the type of research that we do, which is content analysis, is done by highly trained PhDs. And when we started partnering with Google back in 2011 or so, one of the questions they wanted to help us answer is, can machine learning help us go deeper and quicker with our research? And so we were awarded in December of 2012 a $1 million grant to help us answer that question. And so we formed a partnership with Dr. Sri Narayan, who leads USC Viterbi's SAIL laboratory. And that helped us create GDIQ, which allowed us to benchmark video content. And it's a hybrid because there's some machine learning and a lot of PhD and human expert coding to come up with these analyses. But that's after the fact. So that can tell you, how's the industry doing? How's TV doing? How's film doing? How's global advertising doing? But it's after the fact.
Okay.
Whereas spell check for bias is something we thought about as, how could there be an intervention? It's much cheaper to fix things on the front end, on the back end. How could we have something that uses a lens to evaluate scripts that can point out opportunities for casting, point out opportunities to improve representation for untapped communities in a way that is authentic, is not checking boxes, is not interrupting or disrupting the authentic truth of the storyteller, and is not invasive. And that's how Spell Check for Bias came about, again, in partnership with USC Viterbi. And it's a combination of AI, machine learning, and a lot of human expert coding, which is handled by our PhD research team. And it's been very helpful. And one of our partners, NBC Universal, who's been very public about it, has changed many of their scripts as a result of utilizing Spell Check for Bias.
That's so impressive that's something that exists, that's able to exist, that the PhDs have come up with, because like you said, it's, again, going back to the cold hard data, like that's what people need to see to be able to be like, okay, we can't disprove this. Like this is something that needs to change, but also not making it just feel clinical, not making it just feel like it's checking boxes, and having that hybrid. It's really amazing. And it's also amazing to see that it is being put to use. That's so good. It's so inspiring.
No, it's very inspiring to know that, a tool like this exists for change, because you can only say it so many times. And I think you do see forced changed, and you can always feel it when you're watching a story and you're like, they were trying to do the right thing, but now it just looks worse and inauthentic. Like, I
You can
think
tell when they're just checking the
we're,
boxes.
yeah, exactly. Like we're smart. We're all smart here. We can pick up on those kinds of intricacies. So when you have a tool like this that's really trying to go in depth and still stay true to a story, but like open up the floor for everyone, I really think that's like such an important piece of resource that a lot of people could probably benefit from. But I love that NBC is being a leader in this way and advocating for that. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure over the years you've worked with so many different, NBC is one that you mentioned. I'm just curious to see kind of the scope of who has put this to use.
Other partners that have been very public about GDIQ and our audits, Mars, Lego, we've done a lot of work with Google, we've done a lot of work with Meta. So there are a lot of partners that have leaned into leveraging our research tools.
That's
Amazing.
awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome.
I'm curious too, because the website name is See Jane, where that comes from. And I love the tagline, if she can see it, she can be it. I've seen used a few times. So if you could tell us a little bit about that too.
That was really all of Geena's vision, going back, hearkening to the original See Jane books. And that's how she kind of came up with the name.
I love that. Again, it's like, going back to her daughter as a toddler, and, how kids learn about life by seeing themselves represented in media. It's so important.
I thought it was interesting too, like how, women are seen depicted through, various stages of life, like whether it's going through pregnancy or age. I think it's important to have representation, and again, like a more accurate depiction or telling, or just, different colors of it. And I think what she started at, examining that, I think it's so important, and something I'm hoping to do more of myself in storytelling. So no, I love the mission, and I think we can all agree that it's an important, good one.
Yeah. I also see that the Institute works closely with the Bentonville Film Festival. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So Geena was approached by Walmart to lead a film festival that is centered on celebrating women and diverse voices. It is a competition, and Walmart is our founding sponsor. Coca-Cola is our presenting sponsor. And we have a film competition that ranges from documentary to narrative. We have a script competition, and it's in Bentonville, Arkansas, because that's actually where the headquarters are for Walmart. And
Oh, I was wondering why. Okay.
we're actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary this
Aw.
coming, it's the week of June 10th. And it's a wonderful film festival. I think it's the 5th largest film festival in the United States.
Wow.
And it's very welcoming for filmmakers. And we also have a lot of panel programming, and it's just a great environment.
That's fantastic. I had heard of the festival and just a very short synopsis of what it was about, but I didn't know all of that, went into it as well. So that really sounds like a great festival.
And I'm sure it's available on the for our listeners who want to apply. Are submissions open currently? Or, I mean, listening right now, we're in the spring of 2024, but yeah, like if you know off the top of your head, is it accessible on Film Freeway? Like
It is, and there is a
amazing.
criteria that
Mhm.
looks at gender, race, ethnicity, and a lot of other dimensions in terms of their criteria for the film festival. And I don't know if submissions are still open. They may have closed, I'm not sure, but you could easily find that on the website.
Beautiful. Yeah, we'll definitely want to point that out for anyone who wants to align and submit.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Actually, we're finishing post-production for our first feature and looking into the festivals to submit to and stuff. So we're always looking for festivals like that really, concentrate on whether it's women in the positions of production or telling women's stories and really just, inclusion, major inclusion. So
Yeah, we're really proud. We did just get awarded the Reframe Stamp of Gender Equality in Production Award. So we've been talking about that this whole time on our show and what our mission was. So just to be acknowledged in that way is an honor. And we definitely, again, excited that we can align further with you. And what can, creatives who aren't necessarily you are B2B, but is there anything, do you any sponsorships that you do furtherwise, or grants that are offered, or ways for people to get involved, that sort of thing for us filmmakers?
Besides donating?
Yeah, besides, donating. Maybe
Yes, so
works
we
as well.
actually offer a year-round membership for individuals, for corporates, that provides a lot of networking, a lot of professional development, first look and participation at all of our research events, screenings, and a lot of other programs. So you can learn more about that on our website, which is cjane.org. And also, it's really important that we get the word out there. So we're happy to have people follow us at GeenaDavis.org on all social platforms. And if there's anyone out there who is working in the industry and is interested in our research or having us come make a presentation, we do that all day long. So there's a lot of other ways. There's a lot of ways for people to get involved.
that's amazing. It's great too that it's resources that you're providing for the filmmakers, the creatives, but also, like you said, if you want to get involved with this research, like there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved.
cjane.org, y'all, we got this. We're excited to push this out for sure. And I think share, because there, like you mentioned, there's so many different ways. Is there anything that we haven't touched on today, Madeline, that people must know about the mission or an event coming up that, people can pay attention to?
One of the research studies we're really excited about that we're actually going to present during the Bentonville Film Festival in June is one of the first ever portrayal of mental health in young children's TV. And that was funded by an amazing philanthropist, Regina Scully. And we're really thrilled that we're going to be presenting that at Bentonville. And when you think about our world and all the pressures that face our younger children, what are the opportunities to socialize mental health issues at the broadest scale in programming, in content that our kids are watching upwards of 7 to 10 hours a day. So we're really excited about that. We have a lot of other research and events that will be coming out, and it is our 20th anniversary. We're about to launch a little bit of a refresh on our brand, a new visual identity, a little more contemporary. So I would say stay tuned. That will actually have happened probably by the time this has launched. But yeah, there's a lot happening.
That's amazing. Listeners, make sure you're following. Like, there's a lot of exciting things coming up and you want to stay on top of it. That's very cool.
We love it. Well, Madeline, thank you so much for joining us today. And it was really cool to learn more about the technology and what you guys are actually doing to ensue like a different change, a different way for us to see ourselves and consume media in the way that we hope moves forward and just normalizes eventually, because it's still sometimes silly for us to say like we want gender balance. Like, why is things like this still happening today? But it takes time. And I guess if you have any last words, like for where you've worked through so many different corporations and been on so many boards, do you feel like we are headed down towards a mission of change and I mean, hope for like a better future?
Well, that's a really broad question. So I would say two of the mission goals that we were really excited to achieve is in 2019 and 2020 respectively. We were able to achieve gender parity for female lead characters in the highest rated Nielsen TV shows, family shows, and in the largest grossing family films in the US, followed by achieving gender parity for secondary characters in television. So it shows that our theory of change can work, and that type of change can work where in the real world it could take hundreds of years for women to achieve parity in many of the different business categories, law, politics, etc. But at least we know in the world of make-believe, it's absolutely possible. And what happens in the world of make-believe can have real world impact. So that's what we're really excited about.
Beautifully said.
Absolutely. Yes, right?
Yeah, that was perfect. That's what I wanted. You know, I was fishing and I got it. No, thank you, Madeline, for sharing all of that, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for listening to Femme Regard Podcast. If you like what you hear, tune in every Friday for more tips on the filmmaking business and insightful conversations with industry professionals. We can only grow with your support, so please subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can also join the Femme Fam on Patreon. For more on us, check us out at femregard.com.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.